Welcome to the Westminster Tradition, a podcast with lessons for the public service. My name is Alison Lloyd-Wright, Managing Director of the Good Trouble Group, and joining me today on Kaurna land, as always, are my two fellow recovering public servants, Caroline Crozer-Barlow.
Hello, Alison.
And Managing Director of Good Government Advisory, Danielle Elston.
Hello, Alison.
Today we are back with our third episode in the BSE series. In episodes 1 and 2 of this series, we've explored a scandal without a clear crime, a story of a long-term, low-probability risk managed largely through science-led precaution, from feed bans and SBO bans to the politically fraught establishment of a centralised meat hygiene service. And our general take in discussing it so far is that, on balance, it's been pretty good public servicing. Decisions erred on the side of caution, research investment grew knowledge steadily, and enforcement gaps were addressed as they surfaced. However, even as this happened, reassurance cycles, like John Gummer's infamous beef burger photo op with Cordelia, got increasingly brittle. Now in episode 3, we pivot to a crisis response when the revelation of confirmed transmission of BSE to humans impacts the machinery of the beef chain, consumer confidence, and the UK's relationship with Europe's authority. Danielle has not coped
Beef chain.
with the expression beef chain.
I'm not very grown up, sorry.
So, Caroline, can you take us to the revelation of human links?
Yeah, look, so for most of the early 90s, the question of whether BSE could transfer to humans was unresolved because the very long incubation period meant that while there weren't any human cases, it didn't mean that there weren't some coming. Yeah. And look, classic CJD occurs sporadically at a low background rate. I hope not sporadically. Anyway, usually, yeah, thank you for that. Usually in older people. So
That's the spontaneous
the spontaneous
folding.
And can I just say from a public perspective, this spontaneous lack of whatever is just terrifying, right?
I know. 1 in 2 people every million. I was thinking about that. That means like 60 people a year in Australia are just, their brains are rotting.
And that's the stuff that you fear because it's so, I mean, it's that Lee Sales book.
Yes.
Any Ordinary Day.
No. Any Ordinary Day.
That's Julia Baird.
Yep.
Any Ordinary Day, which is like everyone goes to a theme park all the time, blah, 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 and then 9 people die. Or she does Walter Mikacs from Port Arthur, like his experience. Yeah. It's the stuff that is just so
vanishingly rare,
but could happen to you, that makes the public part so terrifying.
I think that's really right. And at this period in time, so like there's 2 cases in dairy farmers in 92 and 93 that they're like, holy dooly, maybe this is it. But actually it turns out this is just like
organically random
wow. CJD, I know, right? Anyway, from about 1994 onwards, the neurologists at the CJD surveillance unit, which they'd set up as a result of all this science, which is at Edinburgh, begin to see a small cluster of cases in unusually young patients, so teenagers and people in their 20s. And I'm really sorry to say this, but like when they chop open their brains, they can see the holes are distinctive. This is how we know the dairy farmers were
different.
Yeah, right.
So it looks different. Neuropathological features, it looks different.
So you can tell. There's no question.
Yeah. This is different from normal CJD. And then they sort of later do a bit of kind of scientific magic where they kind of like, and it looks quite like BSE, right?
Yeah.
So by early 1996, the Scientific Advisory Committee, SEAC, conclude that although they don't quite know how, the balance of evidence has shifted enough to say it's likely that these are linked to BSE.
Oof.
Yeah. So, look, the announcement in Parliament on March 20th, 1996 just detonates everything. Mm-hmm. Within hours and a couple of days at most, beef consumption drops by half.
Wow.
I mean, to be honest,
it's amazing the other half, right?
Yeah.
Livestock markets seize up. Major retailers and food chains move first. I remember McDonald's announcing they wouldn't use UK beef. I remember that quite clearly. The fast food chains follow. Schools, hospitals, local authorities all begin just pulling beef from the menu.
And the question of liability must be on everyone's mind as well. I mean,
Yes.
presumably McDonald's lawyers went, look, we're not sure who's liable, but for God's sake, the minute they've announced it, there's a chance we are liable at that point.
So that'd be a no.
That'd be a no.
Yeah. Although I do think you're putting more of a rational lens on it than maybe, like I think it is just like people don't want to eat our burgers if they think they're UK beef.
Yeah.
So
we'll sell different beef.
Yeah, that's right. And so, Alison, for me, this one is really where BSE starts to remind me of COVID, because it's less about the kind of pandemic risk thing. It's more about managing risk is also managing people's feelings about risk.
Yeah. Likelihood,
Yeah.
consequence, severity.
But that is not how people feel about it.
Yeah, exactly.
And then there's another way in which it feels uncomfortably like COVID. So I did say we were going to get here. The March announcement doesn't trigger a kind of clean emergency response in government. It unleashes like absolute chaos. So on the 20th of March, Minister Hogg, again, honest to God, he could not. I just love the
Gummer
Brits.
and Hogg.
Yeah, I know, right? Because they have that saying on the rest is history, the unimprovably named. Here's another unimprovably named. Minister Hogg announces the actions that have been recommended by the scientists, right? Which are remarkably modest because, of course, actually, like now we know it can transmit to humans. Nothing else has changed. They've already got everything out of the food chain, right?
Yeah.
So the modest recommendations are that they're going to debone cows over 30 months before you eat them, so you won't be able to get meat on bones. And they ban MBM from all food chains, not just ruminant food chains. So pigs and chickens will no longer be able to eat.
Yeah.
But that's it, right? Like it's just... You can see how
Doesn't feel like the kind of response that if I was a mother of children, and I don't know why I went there as a response, because you tend to be anxious about children dying.
Yeah.
Whether I'd feel like
that was sufficient.
And I'm not sure I would know that a ruminant animal was. Like it's not feeling like the government's keeping me safe.
That's exactly right. And
my for shame on this one is did not immediately trigger a clean emergency response.
Yeah.
And I mean, ever it was thus, though, with unique and novel crises, catastrophes, emergencies, there's always a bit of a period where we could have been standing up a better emergency response before we did.
And
we
can
rarely
always
get
see
in
it
front of it.
In hindsight, it's easier to say it.
Yeah, in hindsight, it's easier to say it, but...
Well, so Packer in his book, Politics of BSE, describes, so he's the secretary of MAF at this point in time, he describes that in the 12 days after this 20th of March announcement, there are 20 what you might call cabinet meetings, except they're not cabinet. So 12 days, 20, so more than one a day.
Wow.
As he describes them, they're not really cabinet committee meetings though. They're ministers meeting in loose shifting configurations, sometimes, in the morning, sometimes in the evening as well, different people in the room each time. They're trying to do this kind of question of what do we do to support industry, what might make people feel better. Decisions taken in the morning are revisited by the evening.
Yep.
You can read in the evening news what was discussed in the morning meeting because the ministers are all leaking.
Yep.
The officials are kind of trying to do advice, but, how do you advise in this?
And how do you advise an amorphous shifting...
It's like when little kids play football, and they all follow the ball. It's like the cloud ball. It's a total cloud ball situation. So Richard Packer in his book describes, I think, like a really useful way of kind of capturing how much things shifted. So he talks about how just before the 20th of March, his minister, Minister Hogg, had said to Cabinet, look, we're going to announce this horrible thing. I think we should have a really bold announcement to go alongside it. We should ban all cattle over 30 months being sold into the market. We should issue a massive beef recall and we should do a judicial inquiry.
Yep.
And Packer tried to stop him from giving this advice to Cabinet, right? He was like, bad idea. Not because he thought it was wrong, but because he thought the timing was such that the Cabinet, remember this is before the announcement, were not ready to hear it.
Yep.
So he thought, Treasury's going to say it's really expensive, we don't need to spend that much money. The Prime Minister's going to say we're overreacting, it's not what the science says, And
I appreciate that, but again, that feels very Renee Leon Robodebt, which is how much softening up and preparing of the political class will I have to do the right thing. And yes, it's a party job. And also, you can't wait.
Well, and so credit to the minister, unlike, in fact, so the public servant said don't take it. The minister took it and he got smashed by his colleagues who were all like, no. But they couldn't later on come back and say, well, you didn't tell us. And he was like, try to do it.
Exactly.
I really like, so the sense that we have to do more, actually the kind of options start to kind of winnow down because the supermarkets come to them and say, look, we're not even going to give you, if you give us deboned beef over 30 months, there's no way we're going to sell it. But they do say, but if you banned beef over 30 months, maybe we would return it. So you kind of get this thing where the options start to emerge out of the scrum, out of the chaos of kind of this dynamic back and forth meeting. It's not because it's like a good policy process, as Richard Packer describes it. It's just like over time, the space for alternative decisions closes and you end up with, on April the 3rd, what do they announce? They announce an over 30-month ban, which is exactly what Hogg took to them.
How long between those?
12 days. That's the 12 days where they have 20
12
meetings.
Days. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And again, if you didn't raise it at the time, it all becomes hindsight, but they weren't wargaming out in the, I've forgotten what year we're in, but however many years we've had SEAC and we've had the hand washing cow unit and whatever. Gaming out that we don't think it's possible, but they start to get really nervous and they didn't game out. Like
scenario.
Yeah, and I don't mean at a really high level, just like he would be the 29 ways forward and he would be some of the risks of some of them. And
I don't know. Like, I just don't know.
They had whole units, right? Doing the science, doing the...
But how do you know what's going to stick? Like, Packer has this thing where he says, what felt too much on Monday can feel too little on Thursday.
Oh,
100%.
Right.
And what really strikes me here in the similarities with COVID is exactly that, the rapid movement of everyone.
Sentiment.
But also of your decision makers who sometimes, take a while to brew over a certain proposal. Yeah, what seemed like too much on Tuesday is too little by Thursday. But also how challenging it is for the public service to brief and manage this chaos, or even just to exist in this chaos where there's like 2 quasi-cabinet meetings a day.
And there's still politics, right? It's the final year, it's the final term of the long-standing Tory government.
Hence all the leaking on the front page of the paper.
I assume that Tony Blair is the opposition leader at this point and being young and charismatic and right in their tail. So when you've got 5 or 6 departments and the schools minister going, we're taking beef out because our parents are this.
Yes,
there's still
exactly.
The idea that there's no internal politics and jostling at that point that is unrelated to the crisis that is all about.
Hence them all leaking.
Yeah, hence them all leaking.
Right.
Yeah.
And so how do public servants live in that environment, but how do they still brief best?
Yeah, brief best off of their best advice, especially when you're, quasi-cabinet meeting twice a day. Each of those meetings is spitting out work.
Different work.
Different work that they want done somehow in the next 3 hours before they're going to meet again. Really challenging, I think, to maintain a single kind of coherent theme of advice. Let's just put it that way.
Yes,
it's not even consistent advice because the advice might need to shift. But just a consistent theme.
This is how we're framing it up. These are our primary objectives. Are you still thinking these are our primary objectives? Are we rebalancing that?
And
it's almost that back to first principles.
I was just going to say back to first principles and the objectives, but then I think there's also like the multiple lenses, because when things move really quickly, it's like somehow the economic beat the comms lens in that particular meeting, but we're going to head back there the next time. And so you need your what bit's policy, what bit's legislation, what bit's economic, what bit's, service provision, and then you need to kind of be tracking the changes, even if the objectives don't change and in some ways the risks don't, because different arguments get up, but often for a day. So this argument of equity got up for a day and then everyone completely forgot about that and they were only worried about the economics of it and then whatever. 100%. And so you need to kind of, the first principles is objective, risk and opportunity, but then the middle part is
holding
which lever in between is, as of this moment, winning the information and also then making sure that you're remaining to provide the other stuff. So if the economics are up today and we're doing X, Y, Z because that's what everyone, this last one, it's the remembering that there are 6 other fields. So what does that mean for the comms and what is that we get? So are we going to ban it by legislation or using some power or...
Yeah.
Or at least being able to describe that the economic impact of this type of activity is different than the economic impact of that type of activity. And so we're going to allow one but not the other, even though to the punter at home, they might be hard to distinguish from a kind of risk perspective. they're not hard to distinguish when you factor in the other things that you need to factor in.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think, I wanted to just, because the practice questions for public servants, like there are people like you, Alison, who are kind of deeply in the centrals during COVID, and it's like you're involved in kind of this exact question of how do you make sure that the advice coming out of particular committees is translating properly across. So there's that sort of information. For other public servants working in a policy space, I was trying to think, like, what is useful advice when you're in this chaos? And I think one of the things that is quite useful, just having worked in education during COVID, is one, it's useful to not bitch and moan about the fact that decisions keep changing.
Yes.
Like, that is a really unhelpful thing to do, and you can spend a lot of time kind of eating up a lot of emotional energy and senior energy on those questions. So I just think, like, there's something about kind of recognising you're in this different place and you put yourself in a different, where you're like, we are just subject to whatever is spitting out of...
Exactly. In the same way that you would be if there was a bushfire, right?
Exactly.
But people find those, what were those characteristics from that book that you were talking about?
Oh, that was offline. But yes, people find, so there's a New Species of Disaster book by Kai Erikson. It's about 10 years old, and he talks about like human disasters that are kind of hard to deal with when they're silent. So like they have a long gestation, you can't know that they're coming. When they are sort of human related. So and then also when they don't have a neat beginning and end.
Yeah, but the invisibility is quite different in a BSE and in a COVID to a bushfire. You can see that.
It's coming at you, Bubba.
It's coming at you, and you're going to follow the instructions that you were given.
Yeah.
And when those instructions change, you assume that the wind changed, or they thought that the water bomber was going to get it, but it wasn't enough, and you're not double second guessing, and that is like...
And no one's an expert. You don't expect to be the expert on bushfires, but I might be the
but you're
expert
not even doubting why the advice might have changed, right?
Yeah.
Like, just clearly there are some additional facts that I don't have access to, and now we're doing this instead.
Yeah, so I think that would be my best practice advice for public servants, like get on the chain. Get on the train.
And also, this is all that's happening now.
I'm
so sorry for your other very important special reform projects, but they're going to have to go back on the back burner for a little while.
Yeah, and probably your staff are going to be allocated to go deal with something that's really annoying because you're like, like absolutely, like that is that's
my other, I guess, volunteer.
Oh, I love that.
Be a helper.
Be a helper.
Yeah.
Ask what you can do either from your role or from your department or in a secondment, or there's never enough people, there's never enough smart hands on deck for this type of thing because everyone just wants to
And also it's excellent experience for you, and you get to see things at scale and speed.
You would never otherwise.
For lots of, that you would never otherwise. It's not, scale and speed aren't things we do a lot of. So
No, that's a really good point. Okay, well, that is good advice. So we've ended, so we've just covered the kind of madness, like the complete chaos, and that mostly ends sort of on the 3rd of April when they adopt this over the 30-month ban and the supermarkets start restocking beef and like everyone starts to feel a little bit calmer. Before we move on to the next level of escalation, thanks to Brussels in Europe, I did just want to do a little pause and reflect on false reassurance, I guess. So the Phillips inquiry, which we've talked about previously, found that by and large, up to this point, things are well handled, right? And its biggest criticism is that prior to this confirmation of human transmission, so, right up to this point, the reassurance message had been, and they use this word, sedating and insufficiently transparent about the potential risks, right? And we touched on this a little bit in the last one, but I think the inquiry seems to suggest that if only people had been reminded constantly that while the evidence at the point beef was safe, then there might have been some, but that there was still some chance it might come to humans, then this mayhem might have been avoided.
I disagree.
I mean, I'll go back to my argument for the 3 episodes, which is until it happens.
Having, of course, encountered nowhere near the same depth of evidence as this inquiry contemplated, but based on our discussion over the last couple of episodes,
I disagree.
Just think it over-eggs the idea of how much people care about things that aren't happening right now. I mean, there's risk running around the place all the time.
Yeah.
And our nervous systems as a general populace cannot be assessing those risks all the time.
Yeah.
I think if it had been less sedating, everyone would have stopped eating beef.
Well, this was Alison made that point.
yes,
and with
exactly.
the long incubation period. Yeah,
There is no...
There is no middle.
It also potentially wouldn't have changed much because with a long incubation period, the people probably already had it already.
Well, and
that is very true.
Drawing on algal bloom, a lot of people stopped eating seafood, which was actually worse for the seafood industry than the algal bloom.
Yeah.
Because the people that could still fish in clean, unaffected waters
Suddenly
were fishing
no.
and they couldn't sell anything.
Made it excellent for a seafood lover like me because it became really cheap.
It's true.
And I tried to support endlessly with that. But I think people would have walked away. I think if it hadn't been sedating,
Yeah,
you would have
that's
just
right.
created...
One or the other.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And then
Either
also
big
Boy Who
response
Cried...
or no response.
Also,
Yeah.
Boy Who Cried Wolf, then that would have had a human transmission.
Yes.
And everyone would have been, I thought that was happening for the last 3 years and I stopped eating beef 3 years ago. What do you mean? Like,
Yeah.
So Richard Packer, our cranky math secretary, he has this great line which I really like, where he says, "If, as now seems certain," he's writing this in 2000, "we are to embrace a culture of openness in all such warnings and judgments, we need to be clear that we're doing so because on balance it's the best policy. But if we imagine that this openness will never give rise to problems, we face some large disappointments." And I just like,
Indeed.
He also, I think, offers a really good example in the other direction. So in July of 96, so only 4 months after this, right, the Scientific Advisory Group notes new evidence that BSE may be transmissible to sheep, right? And so they advise the public, or they put in place a rule that heads of sheep should be deboned if they're over a year old. Sorry, Danielle. And as they make this announcement, all the public servants and everyone, all the ministers are just like waiting for the ground to fall out from under the sheep industry. And nothing happens.
Interesting. Turns out people aren't eating that many sheep heads.
Well, no, it just turns out like their fear was
Yeah.
maxed, right?
Yeah.
They're like, I
take in
have
any
dealt
new-
that one.
Yep.
And he says, I really like this. Occasions such as this make me highly suspicious of claims that with enough foresight and effort, consumer reactions can be accurately predicted. And I just think that's right. So this is where I don't agree with you on your risk mitigation planning, because I actually don't think you have to be prepared for a range of different scenarios, but I just don't think you're ever going to be able to know what is going to hit people's funny bones on this and what isn't.
It's like that line from Men in Black where Agent K is telling Will Smith about the existence of aliens, and Will says, why can't we just tell people are rational, they'll, and he says, like, no, a person is rational. People are wild, dangerous, unpredictable.
That's clearly,
And again,
that's our intro grab.
also now,
Yes.
this is all still pre the internet, so it's even worse now. I take your point. I mean, I'm not talking about public scenario planning. I just think they had well-resourced committees, etc., and they could have given those 5 economic options, like just in the bottom drawer, ready to go for the process of when it potentially went bang and mad. But I think what we're really talking about is how much can people engage with risk as a populace and how much can they engage with it with government. I think you see this outside of this context in terrorism.
Yes.
Like something goes wrong, everyone engages in it, and you can't live your life at a heightened degree of looking for risk forever. And so over a period of time, like that comes down and then you have a reason for it to go up again.
Yeah.
And our policy making and risk and regulatory tools
Yes.
don't really they assume a flat line
Yes,
of what people can engage with. But I can't engage with mad cow terrorism, pandemics, global warming,
and Donald Trump
at the same high level the whole
Yeah,
time. And
exactly.
so as a policymaker, you really have to be like, are people maxed out, and when do we need to pull the chain of kind of the beef chain?
Dear God.
It's a bell that goes off now. But, this is the thing, in your world, you're the scientist for X, and asthma and antibiotic resistance is the next whatever.
Yes.
And it's like you've got someone over there in either climate change or global affairs going, oh, I'm never going to have to worry about antibiotic resistance because we're all going to die in a war before then.
Yeah.
And there's just a massive limit to how much you can engage in it. And it's getting worse. And so there's a big role for you to work cross-departmentally and kind of have that look out at the community and go, can they take any more? And is this the thing for which we have to kind of hit the alarm for?
Yeah.
And so I guess the question that Caroline has posed here, which I think is a really excellent one, once you're in it, how do you pivot your advice when the evidence hasn't changed but the tolerance of risk has?
Yeah, I put this question in because I do a little bit like that earlier thing about how do you be helpful.
Yes.
What is really unhelpful in this context would be to continue providing advice. Say there's no change in the risk of transmissibility. We've done everything we need to do in the beef chain. Like, why are you
guys?
Yeah, like there's nothing more, right? Like that is unhelpful.
Yes.
And so I think but I definitely know people who would find it hard to make that pivot.
To be like, the evidence is the evidence, and the evidence hasn't changed, and so I'm just serving you up the same briefing that I served you up 12 days ago.
Exactly. It's a real challenge. So I think, like, as a leader, my advice would be put the right people on providing the second round of advice, right? Like, I'd just be like, yep, I can see that you are constitutionally not the sort of person who is going to be happy thinking about more measures if you think it's irrational to do anything more. So maybe I will ask your neighbour to give me this advice.
But that assumes that the external environment isn't part of the... So
that's true.
I'm again constantly baffled with non-news absorbing senior public servants who give me snot about having a News Limited account where I'm like, I believe I am...
Do people give you snot about that?
All the time about the types of news I consume, because I just think you cannot... I can't give advice without seeing the mirror of how it's landing.
Yeah.
Doesn't become the leading. You're not a politician or a PR or whatever else. But I would argue that the person who's like, but the evidence hasn't changed. The scientific evidence may not have changed, but how the people of the country have fueled has changed.
Yes.
How your cabinet has feel and think has changed.
Yep.
And so they are actually a driving part of the evidence that you are obliged to respond to. Again, I'm not talking about responding to Twitter, like not in a hyper-responsive way,
No.
You can feel a mood shift in the community on things. And... you do need to know about it. Like I do end up in lots of arguments. People are like, that's not none of my business. I pull out the scientific and economic, and I have a framework and I have a technical, and I just give that advice. I'm like, yeah, if you are a senior public servant, you are obliged to know what community feeling is like, and and what's going on out there. And so that has changed.
Yep,
in this case,
and your authorising environment has changed.
Yeah, the minute they went out on the 20th of March, lots of things changed that needed to be responded to.
Yeah, that's true.
So tell us a bit about what happens when we get start to interface with the EU.
Look, so one of the key drivers of...
Is this the beginning of Brexit?
Like,
I mean, retrospect, I think so.
Is this episode 1?
I do.
The early years?
I'm not gonna lie to you.
This. I mean, I imagine it's this in other...
Well, it's this and then it's foot and mouth disease. Anyway, I'm not going to lie to you. As I'm reading this, part of it, I'm like, I think I would have voted for Brexit watching some of this not because... Anyway, I'll explain my thoughts on that. We'll go back to that at the end. So one of the things that happens is that on the 27th of March, so the announcement's on the 20th, they still haven't got to the getting rid of the 30-month-old on the 3rd of April. On the 27th of March, the EU bans British beef exports indefinitely. And when I first read this, I thought they meant like the EU wouldn't take British beef. But no, because they're part of a like common agricultural policy, Britain is now legally not allowed to sell beef to anyone in the rest of the world. So because they're part of... it's not just to the EU, it's to everybody. In fairness, 80% of their exports went to the EU. But like it does, like then you're like, holy dooly, that is a huge... So it's not just those countries saying you can't bring it into us. They're saying you, Britain...
They're saying we make the rules for where you can send it.
Exactly. So
from Brussels.
So for John Major, this is uniquely toxic. He is clinging to a razor-thin majority he's got an election coming up. He's got Tory Euro rifts. It's like a whole thing. And so he really focuses on securing a way out of the ban that can be presented domestically as a victory and not a humiliation. Spoiler alert, that ban is still going 10 years later. And the pressure produces some extraordinary political moments, which I reference just because they're kind of wild. So like in May 1996, the UK adopts a policy of non-cooperation with the EU, and they veto all EU business unrelated to beef until progress is made. It is just like it's Donald Trump-esque wild. Yeah.
But also, like...
Well, I mean, this is the thing, right? So there's this critical meeting in June, the Florence meeting in June, which sets the table for kind of how all of this will get resolved. But by the time the leaders get there, there's this real sense in European politics that we need to find the source of the failure. We need to allocate fault so that then we can say, right, this is how we're going to move forward.
We fixed it.
That's exactly right. And
can I interrupt? I don't want to, before we get going. So if their beef had been moving its way around Europe for the last 15 years, and we know it's got a long incubation period, were the other EU countries, if 80% of it was being exported, starting to see cases of
VCJD?
Yeah.
No. Yeah.
That seems weird.
Yes, not. And what's even weirder is that their herds, they also sent cows, live cows over. So there's a whole subplot about how the EU kind of hid from itself its own BSE crisis subsequent to this, which I'm very happy to talk to you. Germany, Spain, bad actors in this place. Anyway.
Interesting.
Oh, totally, right? Because it's this thing, it's a UK problem. And so the UK has this specific deal done. Now, as Richard Packer talks about it, essentially the logic of the EU at this point, as they're trying to kind of come up with the deal, is if the consequences are this bad, something must have gone wrong, right? And even if that something was just that government ignored the risk for too long, but something's gone wrong. And he really disagrees, and he has this brilliant appearance before a MEP, European Parliament committee, where he says it's an act of God, and they all get offended because he said God, and he says in translation to them something like, well, I'm sorry if I've offended all the atheists in the anyway, like I say, he is an interesting fella. Anyway, but he's like, it's an act of God. It's a catastrophic outcome that arises from this starting point, which isn't anyone's fault, and then there's a chain of events that happen, but actually we did a pretty good job along the way. That is clearly not how the
EU sees it.
feel about it, right? So they come to this deal in Florence. It's got 5 bits. It's like you're going to identify the cattle and movement recording like a digital thing. You're going to recall the feed, the over 30-month ban. You're going to do better at the SBO removal. And you're going to do this selective cull of high-risk cohorts. And some of those were already in process, like they'd already agreed to do them just internally, like the feed recall, the over 30-month ban. And some of those were hard, like the cattle ID and movement, the digital data system. Yeah, spoiler alert, that takes like 5 years and costs millions of pounds and doesn't work easily.
Digital transformation.
Oh, my God. The selective cull of high-risk cohorts is interesting to me because it's presented as like this is going to help us get BSE herds free faster. But actually, if you think about it, it doesn't really make sense that way because BSE doesn't transmit between live cows, right? So getting rid of like an adjacent cow that might have eaten the same food isn't going to mean that you get rid of BSE overall faster. Like, you know, they've all, they're gone or they're not gone, right? Like it's not like it's increasing the kind of risk. But I think what it really captures is this sense of like, it's almost a primal sense of we need a bloodletting.
Yeah.
Like we have to...
I mean, they ate the same food and it's a long incubation, so they could...
Yeah, but that's what the over the 30-month ban is for, right?
Yep.
So you kind of got rid of the risk. Like if they show symptoms, they get killed or whatever. And if they don't, like it's kind of a thing. So this is where they land. There's no pathway after Florence. They've got these 5 conditions. There's no commitment to kind of reviewing their progress against them. It doesn't come up to a vote every year. Like it is just an indefinite shit show. And that's why it takes a decade to get out. I think it leaves us with this question of kind of what do you do to restore confidence when you're not quite sure
what you did wrong.
Right? Yeah.
Did anyone do anything wrong?
So it's fascinating. Anyway.
Did anyone do anything wrong? Or are we still of the view that this was generally good public servicing?
I think it was generally good public servicing. I think I am increasingly uncomfortable with where I think some of this starts with, which is... So I think this started a trend that we live with today, which is I cannot accept an act of God. I cannot accept science that moves. I don't like uncertainty. I have really high expectations of my government to not interfere with the private market unless I immediately want them to do right now and preferably 5 years ago. We are becoming a more and more annoying populace for a political class to serve because we have very contradictory views as to what we want them to do. And we go seeking a whodunit on a range of things that, you know, we might find, and same with, and there's anything wrong with going and doing the whodunit in order to go, okay, well, next time. I'm not sure we ever do the next time part very well. I think we do it all right in emergency management. We review a bushfire or whatever, and then we do tend to change infrastructure or make different decisions about when you have to leave. And, you know, it's been a very hot summer here in Australia, and a number of the things that are different came out of the Black Saturday bushfires in Victoria, and I can remember why I have a new rule, and I remember the review that gave me my new rule. I think that's an example of where it works. I think there's lots of times where we want to go and figure out which junior bureaucrat or senior one missed an email, did something wrong that made a thing happen.
Underreacted, overreacted, both simultaneously.
Yeah.
And yet, I think we, have very little appetite to have. So we want to talk about it all the time. I want to talk about the whole time which bureaucrat missed which policy crime. There's no policy crime here. Right. And yet we don't want to have that conversation about poverty or climate change or
accreting risks.
The increasing kind of bubbling risks that are changing our way of life.
Yeah.
Absolutely no desire to spend money and having that conversation every day. But the whodunit, the true crime version of which bureaucrat or politician stuffed up on insert pandemic or disaster or terrorism or whatever else. And I think it's dangerous. I think it concentrates us on small events for which a tiny few things may have made a tiny few different outcomes, but fundamentally all of it reasonably tiny, and yet sucks all the oxygen away from similar conversations where there is no single kind of failure.
And the thing you said there that really stood out for me was the shifting science. Like, there seems to be this view that science just is.
It's like the word of God.
Yeah.
Yes.
Turns out that's not what it is.
Climate scientists say something different today than what they said 3 years ago, people like that you said.
Yeah.
Instead of being able to kind of accept that these things move, new and further evidence becomes available, that might mean we need to do things differently than we said we would before.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot... there's a lot of eminent people talking about how we responded to information in the 20s and 30s, the 1920s and 30s for anyone.
Yes, I was like...
Just to be clear.
Shit, sorry. I just assumed that was obvious and then realised some people... Anyway.
May not be in the same rest is history rabbit hole you are.
No. And also, I've had a young person say to me recently, do you remember the 1900s? I'm like, oh, yeah, all right. All right. Calm your fun.
Go away.
Anyway, trust in government
and
trust in science. We had less information, but some of these kind of cultural contracts that we have started to fray and erode, but we just spent so much time in the 40s, 50s and 60s rebuilding them. And I just want to figure out how we did that, because I feel like some of this stuff starts with BSE and HIV. Some of the stuff we're experiencing now really started in the early 80s to the kind of mid-90s, and we're at the kind of fall part of trust and confidence. And so how did we rebuild that? I mean, hopefully without a World War II would be my preference.
Yeah, let's not rebuild the existential threat.
So by the summer of 1996, BSE has stopped being a question of science or even really of emergency response. The link to VCJD has been acknowledged, the crisis measures are in place, the politics has hardened around Europe and credibility. What's left is something more difficult and less dramatic, the task of governing a damaged system back to life. Caroline, you're interested in how from here on the state's role is no longer just to reduce risk, but to get the markets to function again. And that's what we're going to look at in our final episode on BSE. Before we go, our mug winner this week is the lovely Maxine. In a throwback and very interesting postscript to our Queensland payroll series, Maxine explained to us that after that saga, the Queensland government made the decision to keep legacy systems intact. Few people in the world still speak the coding language of those legacy systems, and AI can't do it because there are not even any public-facing training documents. She told us about one big Queensland department now trying to replace their payroll system 15 years later with rolling resignations on the project, as once someone realises how massive and impossible it is, they freak out and quit. A good reminder that these issues that we discuss in this podcast are still alive and well in the real world. Till next time.
Humans, for the most part, don't have a clue. They don't want one or need one either. They're happy. They think they have a good bead on things.
Well, why the big secret? People are smart. They can handle it.
A person is smart. People are dumb, panicky, dangerous animals, and you know it. 1,500 years ago, everybody knew the Earth was the center of the universe. 500 years ago, everybody knew the Earth was flat, and 15 minutes ago, you knew that people were alone on this planet. Imagine what you'll know tomorrow.
Just some appropriately bureaucratic disclaimers. While we've tried to be as thorough in our research as busy full-time jobs and lives allow, we definitely don't guarantee that we've got all the details right. Please feel free to email us corrections, episode suggestions or anything else at thewestminstertraditionpod@gmail.com. Thanks to Pampot Audio for our intro and outro music. Till next time.